The idea of making a woman approach me reminds me of the Hanayama Devil puzzle. It felt impossible to solve at first, but once I saw it done, I was left with the feeling of, why didn't I think of that? It felt as if there was something restricting my brain from understanding the puzzle prior to seeing it done. I'd felt this way about the idea of making a woman approach me until I had asked myself two questions that would open my mind. Those questions being, is it a man's job to approach or be noticed? And what should even be considered an approach? After solving this issue for myself, I made a video on the topic for you guys to learn what had taken me months to uncover. The video had received positive feedback. However, there is just one issue, and that issue arises from the misunderstanding of the topic on creating opportunity to be approached and being sociable. I often discuss my videos with people to get their view on a similar situation to better remedy the problem I seek to solve. Whenever it comes to the topic of being sociable, many people misinterpret it to mean being overly talkative. Even after me explaining that's not the case, many people can't seem to properly conceptualize this idea. It looks like we have another Hanayama Devil puzzle on our hands, so for this video I'm going to be focusing primarily on how to be more sociable in your dating life, starting with understanding what I like to call the sociability spectrum. The sociability spectrum ranges from vivacious types to reserved types. Whenever I mention being sociable, people often assume I am only referring to the vivacious types like my good friend Tyson. This side of the spectrum is attached to popular sanguines. They are often really into music for the sake of dancing, singing, or both. Even if they're not big on singing and dancing, they're often very well voiced. However, don't confuse a vivacious style of being sociable as just being loud. Sociability is being socially acceptable, and being loud when no one wants to hear you is a quick way to be the opposite of sociable. So, how do you be more sociable? To answer this question, I would like to point to Dale Carnegie's book. Carnegie repetitively states the importance of being genuine. Don't pretend to like people. Instead, it's best to find a reason to actually like them, because harmonizing with people is often more beneficial than any non-harmonic relationship with them. Tyson, for example, doesn't like being around negative people, so he uses his high energy to bring the crowd's attention to anyone in a bad mood in order to hype them up. Tyson isn't being a sycophant when he does this. In fact, more often than not, he does this to a random person with very low potential to benefit him. Tyson, simply put, genuinely wants as many people around him to be in a good mood as possible, and he accomplishes this by pulling people out of their shell and making the crowd cheer them on for doing it. Let's move away from Tyson's side of the sociability spectrum and look at the other side, the more reserved side. I save this side for last because it is often used as a rebuttal to my ideas by detractors who unknowingly agree with me. The rebuttal is often, I just let women come to me. They don't always like a guy that needs to make noise. I'm sure most of you have heard this statement or something similar to it. Let me make something clear. People who are more on the popular sanguine side of things don't need to make noise, they like to make noise. This idea of I let women come to me is often said out of fear and jealousy. There's nothing wrong with being calm and not doing much of the talking, even if you're at a bar or a club, but as I previously stated, it should be done out of genuineness. If you're doing it because you think it'll make you look cool or because you're realistically afraid of approaching women, then 1, you need to watch my video on approach anxiety, and 2, you're probably not a naturally reserved person. This does not mean you cannot use a reserved style of sociability. It instead means that you must learn it, and on that note, I think it's time to discuss how to know what sociability style best suits you. So you're not naturally reserved, but you have social anxiety. What style do you fall more under? Are you in between? Well, before I answer, let's open our minds again by removing the concept of being naturally reserved or cantankerous towards quiet places. Instead, let's treat it like wine tasting. If you've never been wine tasting, then you don't know what's good and what's bad, and any comments you make to sound sophisticated or fit in will be seen as weird to more experienced wine tasters. If you want to get into wine tasting, the first thing you need is the desire, and then you need experience. Similarly, whether you want to be sociable through reservation or vivacity, you first need the desire and then experience. I myself developed a more reserved sociability style on accident when I was in college. I went to some peers in the summer and wanted to know how people can just sit and enjoy nothing. I had a 2-hour break in between classes, so I sat at the pier and asked a million questions to myself about how people can actually enjoy this until I actually started to get it. I began to enjoy those moments of peace where I can enjoy the things I thought were beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it's because of that I didn't understand that the people who sat at the pier thought the river was beautiful. I, for one, hate nature, but I think New York City itself is rather stunning. On my walks back to class, I found myself looking for things I can enjoy in my own head. Tall buildings, bay windows, and bakeries were all things that I thought were attractive to look at. And this is the idea of self-entertainment. Whether you want to be more vivacious or reserved, the point is you have to be entertained by yourself and the things you decide to do. This is one way that I found that I can be reserved through the joy of reserved activities rather than being reserved through the restriction of social anxiety. In bars, for example, I enjoy looking at pretty girls, sipping beer, and being around good friends. I eventually would also learn to enjoy being sociable through a more vivacious style. I had a desire to be the life of the party after going to a concert in Brooklyn Mirage. I would begin to learn some dance moves, and I started to actually enjoy the activity of dancing. Along the way, I met my good friend Tyson, and I knew I'd like singing alone in my house, but I was far too shy to sing in front of others. Through Tyson though, I learned to actually experience and enjoy it, and now karaoke is one of my favorite things to do whenever I'm outside, even if I have to sing in front of others. Now, my interest in a vivacious style of being sociable is quite shallow, but I think I've made my point clear. Starting off, most people do not have a style, and this is because the idea of being genuine is actually very complex and very hard to grasp. Just ask yourself questions on this topic and find genuine answers, and you will eventually find your style. Now, this is all much easier said than done, and will likely take plenty of trial and error on your part, but that's okay because, as I always say, practice does make perfect, so don't get upset if these things don't work out for you the first time around, and until next time, peace.